happened to you to stumble upon a video on YouTube, watch it, and then proceed to watch every single video from that YouTuber on their channel? Yeah, that happened to me a few years ago with Evelyn from The Internets.
When I never felt bad, come on, yeah.
So I had the opportunity a few days ago to interview Evelyn from The Internets. And what can I say about her but simply this: she is a storyteller. Whether it is her giving advice, her talking about mental health, her talking about adulting or surviving the pandemic, or even taste testing various foods from different countries, there's always a story in what she is saying. And I think that's why I connected with this YouTuber. So I'm very, very happy that she was willing to sit down and chat with her Montreal internet cousin and share her thoughts and her experience as a student, because it's Madame la Prof interviewing her. So it's all about education. So I'm going to start by saying, welcome, Evelyn from the Internets, to my neck of the wood of the Internets on Madame la Prof online. And I don't want to necessarily talk about because you're very prolific on the internet. I mean, I'm not saying that you are huge, big, but like you have a sizable viewership, and you talk about a whole bunch of different things. And when I say a whole bunch of different things, like you talk about food, you talk about mental health, you talk about surviving life, and you started on your Patreon account some like ASMR type, which is not everybody's cup of tea.
It's also not mine. But I was like, it's fun to like experiment with things that you don't necessarily like.
Like I
know.
No. And I mean, you've done so many things, and it would be easy to talk about all of your accomplishments. But being a teacher, I want to ask you questions about how you were as a student and education, because that's my shtick. That's my shtick.
Yeah.
So let's start off by asking Evelyn, how was Evelyn as a student when she was a kid? Way back in the day.
Oh man. Way back in the day. Super nerd. But so it's weird. I feel like the movies and like TV kind of tell us that nerds are one way, but like I always had friends. So when I say, oh, I was a nerd, it was like, yeah, I was a nerd with friends. Like very had friends, was part of society and like school, but I was very into academics. My dad was really the one who was like, you have to do good in school. Doing good in school is the way that you move through the world better. And so even things I didn't like. So we would do flashcards at home. I was in spelling bees. I was in like math Olympics. I was, reading by the age of 3. I was doing all these things. Then I did like advanced classes, trying to get college credit. And so I was definitely into my academics and into my studies. I was an A student, because anything other than an A wasn't really allowed.
I share that experience, having a Greek mother, and I would get something like a 78 on 100, and she would say like, "What happened?"
It's like, I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
If I knew what happened, it wouldn't have happened.
Exactly. And even my students today, they still experience that same type of pressure from home. Like, you better bring home a 90, anything less than a 90, and it's a death sentence practically.
Yeah.
So I don't want to say what were your parents hoping that you would become when you grew up, but what
Right.
did you want? What did you envision for yourself when you were growing up?
Well, I'm one of those people that's like has always been very consistent in terms of what I wanted to do. From day one, it was anything around media. Like I didn't really know what jobs that would end up being, but like I remember career day in fifth grade, I came dressed up as a movie director.
Okay.
Or I would, when I was in daycare, when I was like 9, there were different clubs, and so I joined newspaper club. So I've always, junior high, I was in newspaper and yearbook. So it's always about like media or like making something for people to read or
And
watch.
you grew up in an era like before YouTube was really a thing. Like I'm not saying you're as old as me, but
Sure.
I think your youth, if my math does not suck, you
Hmm.
you were around at a time when YouTube was not a big thing and social media was not the
Oh yeah.
thing that it was. So
Yeah.
you still
YouTube
had
was,
that
I
vision.
think, yeah, I think YouTube was invented when I was 16 or 17. So growing up, there was no, I couldn't aspire to be on social media.
Okay.
So yeah,
So you basically just saw yourself creating and
yeah.
being in media. So what did you end up
Hmm.
doing when you finished high school and you went to college?
So when I was in high school, so I was a theater kid. Like if I could have had it my way, I would be a theater kid. But if you didn't have a car in high school, like you have to ask for rides because you have to stay after for rehearsals and all of that. So I was like, well, don't have that. So let me choose an extracurricular that doesn't require me to actually have it be extra.
Yeah.
So that's why I joined the newspaper staff. And so
Okay.
that really opened my eyes to journalism. And I remember my newspaper advisor, Miss Weiss, and she went to UT, the University of Texas, and like she would had all the, UT paraphernalia. And so I was like, hey, this is a person that is I think is doing or did what I want to do. And so, yeah, I went to university for journalism. And
Okay.
so I was like, I didn't want to like make up stuff. So I didn't want to go to like English lit or creative writing or
Yeah.
anything. I wanted to just talk to people and create stories from like real events. So I
Interesting.
figured that's what journalism would help me do.
And it's interesting that you describe it that way because I think too often people see journalism as just facts, just facts, just facts. And you're talking
Right.
about creating a story based on people's lives and experiences. Um,
Yeah.
is that a perception that is shared by many people who are in that field, or is that perception like unique to you?
I think it was shared by people who were in my what's it called? Not specialization. There were different
Okay.
sections of the journalism school. So
Okay.
you could apply to be a broadcast major. You could be a newspaper major. You could be multimedia, or you could be magazine. And
Okay.
I chose magazine
Oh.
because broadcast was, I didn't want to be on TV and like talk in a fake accent, um, in like the news voice. Like
Oh
I didn't know
my
how to do that.
God. Yes. Yes.
Newspaper, I didn't want to report there was a fire today, like the facts you were talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then for multimedia, they were just way late. So I felt like I would be
Yeah.
paying someone to tell me what I already know.
Yeah.
They were like, this is a tweet. And I'm like, I'm not paying for that.
Stuff that I
So
already learned on my
yeah,
own.
so I chose magazine because growing up, that was where I could get like the in-depth stories. Whether it was something super, important like, the New Yorker, or whether
Mm,
it was
mm,
something like
mm.
Rolling Stone and like getting to read about Janet Jackson and like her life. And that was very interesting to me.
Rolling Stones, Rolling Stone has
Hmm.
pretty. in-depth articles.
Yeah,
It's not fluff. It's not
not at
fluff.
all.
It,
Yeah.
it has some quality content. Like if
Hmm.
somebody were to tell me I write for that magazine, I would be very impressed. I'd be very impressed. Like,
Hmm.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's not like, well, I'm writing for People magazine. Like, oh.
Right.
No judgment, but it's like just like a notch above Inquirer sometimes, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
The content is a bit like, really?
Yeah.
Sometimes. So at what point did you view YouTube as a potential outlet for what you were doing? Like when did you say, I'm going to give this a shot and see what happens?
Yeah.
Because you did,
So
it
the
wasn't like in high school where you said like, I'm going to be writing and creating content for YouTube.
yeah, there was
Yeah.
no such thing.
Yeah.
So um I've always been into making videos, or, like when I was younger, I would record over cassette tapes. I would beg my parents to buy me like that huge stack of blank DVDs, and then like burn videos onto the
Oh,
DVD. And now
nice.
I don't even have a device that plays
Oh
DVD.
no. Oh.
So, so I used to do things like that. And so when I came across YouTube, I kind of saw it as a shortcut, because before YouTube, you had to take your video and learn how to embed it somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so YouTube, I was like, oh, I just upload it here and I can link it. Like that was very
Nice.
new.
Yeah.
And so I was using it for that. So I would upload to YouTube, not really understanding that it was a social network in and of itself.
Mm.
I kind of thought it was like a dumping ground so that you could get a link
Yeah.
and share it with who you wanted to give the video to.
Yeah.
Um, but then once I was in
You didn't do
college,
USB keys? You didn't do USB keys like so many of us, my generation? What is that?
no, no USBs, no floppy disks, none. Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, but then when I was in college, I started college around the time of the recession.
Mm,
So I started college knowing I might not have a job. And
yeah.
so, especially in journalism, the communication industry in general is driven by advertising.
Yeah.
And in economic decline, advertising is the first thing to get slashed.
Yeah.
So a
Yeah.
lot of newspapers were either going under, firing people, and unfortunately, a lot of news corporations were firing photographers and video people.
Oh man.
And
Yeah.
what that meant is that reporters had to do that work because there
Mm,
was no one to do it. So I was like, well, if I know in 4 years I'm going to have to be a reporter that's also a photographer or videographer, I might as well learn how to do that on the side.
okay. Okay.
So then I taught myself, I've always taught myself editing, but I taught myself the type of editing that would help me make a news package, like a
Yeah.
news
Yeah.
story.
Yeah.
And and that's when I started like, oh, I can just talk to the camera sometimes and like put that on the internet. And that's kind of how it got started. So that was around when I was like 19.
And that's a skill even today. Some people have trouble. Um, like I'm not calling out specific teachers, but there are
Mhm.
many of my colleagues who found it very uncomfortable at first, daunting even to speak to a camera and to record
Yeah.
lessons and whatnot. So it was very difficult. And if you're not used
Mhm.
to that, it is a bit of a challenge. So
Yeah.
you overcame that hurdle. And now I am to understand you are no longer working in that field specifically.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Right. Right.
And how did that come about? Like, I mean, anyone who follows you on your YouTube channel, you've heard the stories. I'm not asking you to rehash the entire story, but like in a nutshell, what was the moment that made you say like, yeah, I'm quitting my job and I'm doing this?
Okay. Yeah. So in a nutshell, graduated to be a journalist. It was hard to find a job. I went to Arizona very briefly for a fellowship. That didn't pan out the way I thought it would. ended up moving back to Austin, Texas,
Hmm.
and going the social media route
Okay.
because I was like, okay, I can't be a reporter. Let me go into social media marketing, which at the time, which was 2012,
Okay.
was not cute. It was like it wasn't a job. It was a lot of
Yeah.
convincing people that my job was real.
Okay.
Um, and so I went to social media marketing and I did that for a couple years. And then at that company, I moved into like me and a couple other employees banded together to
Hmm.
create the video department. And then after a couple years of doing that, the entire time that was going on,
Hmm.
I was also growing my YouTube channel. So it got to a point where I was like, I can't do both.
Hmm.
I can't have a 9 to 5 and then a 5 to like 3 a.m. Like it's
Uh,
not possible.
Sustainable. It's not
It's not
sustainable at all.
sustainable.
Yeah.
And then I got to a point where I was kind of in charge of a team and I couldn't take days off that I wanted to take off.
Mm.
So I was like, well, it's not fair for me to always be gone because I'm off doing some YouTube thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let me just like resign. And so
Okay.
that's what I did.
Okay. Now, of course, when you're looking back at how you were as a student and growing up and going through school and college, is there anything that you're saying to yourself now, okay, hindsight, I should have done this, I should have done this, I should have done this? Or are you happy with the path that you took and that led you where you were?
If anything, um, I would have my time in like middle school and high school. I think that was great. I did the things that I wanted to do, participated in the things I wanted to participate in. When it came time for college, I do wish I would have um, found a way to be part of like the film department just because, I'm self-taught with a lot of things. So like editing,
Yeah.
equipment, lights, sound. The journalism students didn't have access to this. We didn't have clearance, like our IDs
Uh,
physically didn't
yeah,
have
yeah,
clearance
yeah, yeah.
for certain equipment. And so I do wish that I knew more, that I would have learned more about um, film and knew that and been a little more open minded about what broadcast was because I thought broadcast was kind of like corny. And so I didn't want to be a broadcaster, but that is what I'm doing now. I'm in
Well,
broadcast.
yes, yes. It's just it's a very new form of broadcasting because I don't
Mhm.
things are dynamic. I don't think things need to stay the way they were like back in the 60s and the 70s.
Mhm.
And I think more and more traditional media are realizing that no, we have to change, we have to adapt, we have to modify, and we
Yeah.
can't just stay stagnant in that style. And I guess broadcasting is evolving as well, just like teaching is evolving as well.
Mhm.
Every field is evolving. And
Yeah.
one thing that is very, I don't want to say unique because obviously every YouTuber has their way of clicking and connecting with their
Mhm.
audience. But you call your for lack of a better word, your followers, your viewership, your audience, internet cousins.
Yes.
Why do you call them internet cousins? Because obviously, I was flattered when you called me an internet cousin. It's like, oh, you know, there's no relation. And some people might view it as like, well, it might give the audience a false sense of attachment or
Mhm.
value or worth. And is it authentic? Is it genuine? How do you perceive that connection with your
Yeah.
audience?
So first thing is I did not want to have a name for people associated with my name.
Ah,
You know
okay.
how people are like, hey, my Chrissy dolls or
Oh God,
something?
yeah, okay, yeah.
I was like, we're not doing that. I needed something neutral, something that didn't have a gender or an age.
Okay.
I let people tell me they're my internet auntie. Like I don't tell anyone they're an auntie or
Auntie
grandma.
Evelyn.
Like I let them tell me their age. And
Yeah.
so cousin just seemed to be, I don't know, and it's probably this way in other communities, but like in the Black community, we have, in immigrant communities also, it's like this is your cousin, but you're not related. It's like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
it's my cousin.
Yeah. Or
But no one,
there is a link, but like, you know, five
yeah,
generations removed or something like that. Yeah. Yeah. It's the
yeah.
same with
So
the Greeks. Yeah.
it was something that I felt comfortable sharing with people. Like the idea of being someone's cousin is very like we're associated with each other. We don't see each other every day. We don't. Your cousin could be your friend, could not be your friend,
Yeah.
and it felt very neutral.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's why I chose it. And it also became, and it's also easy for people to adopt. There's sometimes some embarrassment with like, I'm a Chrissy doll. No one wants to say that. But if you're like, yeah, I'm an internet cousin, it's
Yeah.
something that like
Yeah.
feels good to say.
Yes. Yes. And it's not, it doesn't feel like you're 12.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
although I do find it cute, and shout out to Danielle Baines-Bridge, and I'm sure massacring her name, and her show that recently ended, Origin of Everything.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yes. Yes.
and she would call Originauts. That's
Yeah.
cute. That's cute. You know, it's not I
Yeah.
feel like a 10-year-old girl, and so there are some titles that are cute, you know, and shout out to her, and I know
Yeah.
that she's no longer doing the series, but you know,
Yeah.
she's still present in other social media. So
Yeah, for
just to
sure.
get back to the connection, were there any teachers that you particularly connected with and you still think about today? Like you mentioned your journalism contact.
Newspaper
Yeah,
advisor.
yes,
Yeah.
newspaper advisor. That's it.
Yeah, Miss Weiss.
Yeah.
I follow her on Instagram still.
Oh, nice.
Um, and then who else? My theater teacher, Miss Freeze,
Hmm.
was very cool just because it's theater, so she was very free, very like always down for a good time. Miss Shane was my English teacher in high school, one of my English teachers. Yeah, those are the people that I remember and that kind of impacted me and were like open to allowing kids to express themselves using the
Mm,
medium that we had in class. Yeah.
okay. Any advice they gave you that still resonates with you today?
I mean, the biggest advice would be like try it out.
Hmm.
So they were very good about like it's not that there's a right answer or a wrong answer. It's like what have you learned from trying out this answer
Okay.
or this way of doing things? And so,
They made
especially
you,
with journalism, yeah.
yeah, they made you comfortable with failure.
Yeah,
Mm.
failure, but also comfortable with not making things up because that sounds bad,
Or taking
but
risks. Taking
taking
risks.
risks
Okay.
for sure. Taking risks and, you know, committing. And that's
Mm,
a very theater thing. Like you
mm,
have to commit. Like
mm.
if you think it, you have to do it
Yeah.
and you have to sell it
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
anyone to believe what you're what you're doing or
No,
saying. So
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. Is there, like, I don't want to say that, is there advice that you would impart to anyone who would want to go that path? But like, what advice would you have liked to have wow, my English is failing right now. What advice would you have loved to have heard, not just recently, but
Mhm.
growing up, going through everything you've done, that now you're capable of giving to others, like, okay, heads up, this is my advice.
Man, my biggest piece of advice is to find a way to familiarize yourself with the business side of things,
Mm,
just because, especially if you are a true artist,
mm.
like someone who's just like just vibes. And it's like it's cute, but like vibes don't pay your
Be the
rent.
I know, I know. Which
So
is why
like
I'm still teaching and not just on YouTube.
yeah, so
Oh
it's
my
like that's the biggest piece of advice. And even in terms of like curriculum, I wish that was a part of curriculum in some way. Like, so that I'm not
God.
crying during tax time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And amusingly enough, a YouTuber from Montreal made a video in my high school before the pandemic, used the
Hmm.
space as a location, filming location, and he
Hmm.
talks about the things that he should have learned that he would have loved to have learned at school. And what you're talking about, doing taxes and
Hmm.
managing your money was something that he wished he had learned, because and it's
Yeah.
still still today a lot of students like, what's the point of learning this? How am I going to apply
Hmm.
this? How is this like concrete, like for my life? And that's
Yeah.
and that's a challenge.
Another thing, and this is just because of the times that we live in, so I
Mm.
don't know what future generations are gonna
Yeah.
have to deal with,
Yeah.
but um, like internet ownership.
Mm,
So
mm,
it's like, especially if you're a content creator or someone who makes things, it might be attractive if a name like I don't know, Spotify. I'm just throwing
yeah.
it out there.
Yeah.
If Spotify is like, we love what you're doing, but
Mm.
like you don't own it anymore. So what
Yeah.
does that mean? So
Yeah.
just learning, just be cognizant of things like ownership. Um, and that's another thing we should have learned in school. That's property,
True.
intellectual property law. Yeah.
Question. I mean, I don't want to say a last final question. You started, I don't want to say a trend, a smack your lip trend. Food is an important part of
Oh,
your
yeah,
life.
absolutely.
And I mean, you were sponsored by, is it HelloFresh? I can't remember.
Yeah, yes,
HelloFresh, yeah.
yes.
And food is an important part of your life. So what are you eating these days? What is your dish du jour? Like, oh my God, if I could have this every day, I'm gonna eat this every day.
If I could, I go in. I have phases.
Okay.
Okay, so I will. Well, that's a lie. There's one phase that will never die, and that's a sweet tooth. If it has sugar in it, give it to me.
Yes. I can
um,
send you more maple stuff. I could send you more maple stuff if
oh man, man. And then recently, it's not sweet, but like I really just like seaweed, just like roasted seaweed. Like that's delicious to me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Nice. It's still too early for you, but what did you have for dinner? What you're planning to have for dinner?
I'm planning to have some leftover ramen and like the good kind, not the,
Nice. Yeah.
kind.
Not the bargain store cheapy ramen. Although you
Yeah.
can always like, zhuzh it up a bit.
Sure
Yeah.
for
Add some a little something something. A little
that.
something something.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna take a look to make sure like I covered my questions, but I think I did. I think we did.
Nice. Yeah.
Nice.
Feels good.
Thank you very much, Evelyn, for doing this. This
Hmm.
is huge. I too took risks. I too took risks, and I asked.
Hmm.
I asked. And what's the worst that can happen? I'm busy. I'm doing stuff with Baby Blow. It's a lot of things. I'm working with Halise. I'm massacring her
Yes.
name. Maybe I realize
Right, Elise, yeah.
you like you're a very busy creator, and I am very, very grateful that you said yes. Merci
Yeah,
beaucoup.
thanks for inviting me on.
I strongly, strongly encourage you to go and visit her channel. Although I know she's not creating a lot of content on YouTube right now because she has other projects going on, please, please, please go and support her on Patreon. I forgot to mention in my intro that she is an award-winning content creator. I'll put a link somewhere below to the video that has garnered her an award at the Buffer Festival a couple of years ago in Toronto. Once again, huge thanks to Evelyn from the Internets. Ta cousine montréalaise te remercie énormément. Have yourselves a lovely day, Internet.